Business ownership's the best way to build wealth, and buying a business is the fastest way to get there. Now, we get a lot of people that come to our website looking to set up trusts. And this is usually because they saw some video on TikTok. But unfortunately, most of these videos are filled with some really bad information. So what I'm going to do here is just give some basics about a trust and show how I use trusts to help protect my family. Now, a lot of videos talk about using trusts to reduce income taxes, but that's not really true. There's really only two types of tax that a trust can reduce. One, there are certain things that you can set up that can reduce capital gains taxes if you sell a business, and also you can reduce estate taxes, but typically not income taxes. So basically the own nothing, control everything model is just total BS. So any income generated within a trust is taxed at a specific tax rate that is for trusts, and those are actually higher than individual tax rates. So if you own something in your trust that generates income, you actually pay a higher income tax rate. Now you can reduce that by, if the trust pays out the income to the beneficiary, then it's taxed at the beneficiary tax rate rather than the trust tax rate. And you cannot deduct any personal expenses because an asset is owned within a trust. If you own a business inside a trust, you can deduct business expenses the same way you could deduct those expenses if that business was not held into a trust. So there's really no benefit. So really, as far as income taxes, the only thing you can really do is you can either keep your tax rate the same or you can accidentally make it higher. Now, like I said, there are some strategies that you can use to reduce capital gains if you go to sell your business. There are some nuances there, and it involves giving up some control. I don't want to go into too much detail here, but if you are planning to sell a business within the next, say, 12 to 18 months, contact your advisors, specifically your attorney, and talk about strategies to reduce capital gains. You need to do this before you actually go out and try to sell the business, because once you have a letter of intent in place, there's nothing you can do to affect your capital gains taxes. They're set. So if you plan to sell a business within the next 12 to 18 months, either reach out to us, we'll set you up with someone, an actual qualified attorney in your state that can advise you. For the purpose of taxes, the most common use for trusts is to reduce estate taxes, or also referred to as death taxes. Now, you only pay this tax if your estate, when you pass, is over $13 million for an individual or $26 million per couple. But those numbers are going to go down. The current law sunsets in 2026, where it'll drop to about $7 million per person. And those numbers typically do adjust with inflation. So the most effective tax-oriented strategy for using trusts is used to reduce a tax that's only charged to wealthy people. That's why wealthy people use trusts. And that's why for a normal person, using a trust to reduce taxes doesn't really make sense. Now, the primary purpose for a trust for normal people is for estate planning, making sure your money goes where you want it to go, or making sure that your children or dependents are taken care of after you pass away. Now, a trust is different from a will in that a will goes through probate court, which has fees. The court doesn't necessarily have to follow exactly what you say. Versus a trust, it's a much simpler process for your heirs and a much better way to make sure the money goes exactly where you want it to go, how you want it to go. So how we use trusts is we have two trusts set up. One is a revocable trust, meaning you can essentially take assets in and out of it freely. And the other is an irrevocable trust, meaning once the money is put in there or once the assets are put in there, it stays. It's permanently owned by that trust. Now, the revocable trust is used to direct our money after we pass away. So we have 3 kids, all minors, so we need to make sure that they are taken care of, all their needs, all through college, and that all their expenses are taken care of, because we don't want them to be financial burden on their caregiver if my wife and I aren't around. And even if you don't have a lot of assets today, that's still a good strategy. We set this up when we had nothing really with our first child. We just had an insurance policy, a term life insurance policy, very simple term life insurance policy that paid into the trust if something were to happen to me or my wife. And that was to replace our income. So really, that's a strategy that almost anyone needs. If anyone has a child, you want to make sure you have term life insurance trust that replaces your income. And then you need a trust to direct how that money is spent, essentially in your afterlife. And the trust is good because it prevents the young child, even someone in their 20s, from receiving a large sum of money. It provides divorce protection if the kids are to get married. Those are considered non-marital assets. The way our trusts are set up, our kids don't get full access until they're 55. So it really limits some of those distributions so that they don't get it all at once and don't get tempted to spend it irresponsibly. And trusts are really easy and inexpensive to set up. You want to work with an attorney. Do not buy a package from social media. Those are just scammy, overpriced. There's just no reason for it. You can get a real life, highly qualified attorney to do it for, $1,000, $1,500, and it's going to save a lot of headaches when you're not around. So now our second trust, our irrevocable trust, is used to manage estate taxes. So anything held in that irrevocable trust is held outside of our taxable estate. So meaning it doesn't count towards that, it's assuming it's after 2026, $14 million total. So what we do is we put about 30% of all of our businesses into that irrevocable trust. So when the assets are essentially worthless right at the beginning, maybe we've put a low down payment, maybe it's a startup business or a venture capital investment. Essentially, you can put an asset into that trust when it's near worthless, and that asset has the potential to grow to something meaningful, and it does it outside of the estate taxes. Now, obviously the negative there is that everything within that trust has to go to benefit the kids, the income from that trust. So for us, it's at least easy. Almost all the money we spend is on them, whether it's their expensive schools or their sports or, their kids are expensive. But basically what you can do is you could buy, say, a $5 million business. You put $500,000 down. So in our example with them owning 30% of the businesses, let's say we bought a $5 million business, we put $500,000 down. So that means the trust would represent about $150,000 of that $500,000. And let's just say everything stays flat. Over the 10-year period, we pay off that $5 million loan with the cash flow from the business. So now that $150,000 asset held in the trust is a $1.5 million asset. So essentially that means we created $1.5 million estate tax free that would pass on to the kids. And estate taxes are about 40%. So just that little move there represents about $600,000 in savings in estate taxes or death taxes. But remember, this only helps if you're above that estate tax threshold. And obviously for this to work, you are no longer alive. Now, that's how we use these. It might not necessarily how you should. There are estate attorneys in every city. You want to talk to a good local attorney. You want someone that's familiar with your particular state's laws. Don't work with any of these social media companies that are advertising packages or telling you should register in a different state. You do it in the state that you live in. If someone's trying to sell you something else, it's just so that they can charge you more. So work with an attorney. It's cheaper. It's better. Reach out if you want to talk more. If you have any questions or you want to talk about any businesses, anything, always just send us a message.